Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to the Elevate Nova Book Circle. This event is a capstone to our year-long event. So I thought I'd just give you a little bit of background of what happened here at the Community Foundation over the past year, how we got here. So this year, the Community Foundation decided to tackle an issue that is very much top of mind for most of us in the country, the polarization of America. Our divisions have resulted in the loss of trust for institutions, we see that every day, and for each other. And we no longer feel like we're on the same team. It's a massive issue. It was decades in the making, and there are no quick fixes and there are no simple answers. What causes polarization? Who benefits from it? How is it affecting us? And how can we address it as ordinary people, right? Ordinary American citizens. We were long on questions and short on answers, but we thought we could make a difference in any event by simply choosing to talk about it, and by highlighting the efforts of some amazing individuals and organizations across the country who have decided to tackle the issue despite its fraught nature and complexity. Inspired by other community foundations across the country, in particular the Delaware Community Foundation, we announced the launch of our very first book circle in January of 2023, chose a book called, quote, "I Never Thought of It That Way, How to Have Fearlessly Curious Conversations in Dangerously Divided Times," and invited the region to read it and discuss it with us. And today we get to enjoy a fireside chat with the author of that book, Monica Guzman. So let me tell you a little bit about Monica. Monica's been a journalist for many years, currently with the Seattle Times. And as such, she's given a very great deal of thought around how to increase understanding between human beings through what she calls curious conversations. Monica is also the founder and CEO of Reclaim Curiosity, an organization working to build a more curious world. She's a senior fellow for public practice at Braver Angels, the nation's largest cross-partisan grassroots organization dedicated to the depolarization of America. Monica was a 2019 fellow at the Henry M. Jackson Foundation, where she studied social and political division. And she was a 2016 fellow at the Nieman Foundation at Harvard, where she researched how journalists can rethink their roles to better meet the needs of a participatory public. She is a Mexican immigrant. She acquired American citizenship at the age of 17. She lives in Seattle with her husband and 2 children. And as she says in her bio, she is the proud liberal daughter of conservative parents. Ladies and gentlemen, would you all please join me in welcoming Monica Guzman. All right, Monica, thank you for coming. It's wonderful to meet you.
Thank you for having me, everyone. This is awesome.
So we're going to have a conversation today. And as you note in your book, conversations do tend to benefit from the freedom to wander. So if our conversation wanders today, it's going to be a good thing, and we'll count on all of you to pull us back to the topic at hand. But in the meantime, we're going to have a good time. So I thought we would begin for you to sort of share your, what I call like our creation stories, you know, like the story behind that little phrase in your bio, that you were the proud liberal daughter of conservative parents.
Yeah, I love that that's the last line of my bio, because it's a way to kind of gauge the nervous tension in the room often. You hear a couple of, laughs and, what? What is that? What does that even mean? But yeah, so you mentioned that I became an American citizen. I'm now a dual U.S.-Mexico citizen at the age of 17. My parents were, delayed watching episodes of Seinfeld in the 90s so they could study for their citizenship exam, and then they got it. And I remember the day that I came home and saw a Bush Cheney sign over my mother's desk, and realized, oh, they're Republicans. Oh, and I was Democrat and liberal, but in that way where I just assumed everyone close to me would be too. And I didn't even notice, right? We'd had all these debates and arguments about all kinds of issues. And so the fact that was the moment where I realized we're really going to be split on this. What was neat about my family is that we started voting right around the same time in this country. And my parents have really considered the power of the vote in America such a privilege, because they grew up in Mexico, where for many, many years, one party ruled. They had elections, but everyone knew they were kind of rigged, and there was so much corruption. So when my parents voted for Trump in 2016, and Trump won, my mother was she felt the power of the vote, because everything around her was saying that Trump would not win, and she voted anyway.
Yeah.
And that was affirming for her of the privilege we have in this country to have our voices matter. And I guess the other thing I'll say is that around our, square table when I was growing up, I couldn't come home from school expecting affirmation from my parents on different issues that we would talk about in school or that I was learning about in high school or college. I could expect friction every single time. And my parents really valued conversation. In fact, just the other night, my mom was telling me, and I didn't even know this, that when she was growing up in Mexico, she's one of 5 sisters. And when they would go out to eat at restaurants, her dad had this rule that they did not talk. So unless their parents asked them something over dinner, they couldn't talk. They couldn't even talk to each other, the 5 sisters. They just had to sit there and eat. So she grew up with our family wanting to make sure that we had conversation. Yeah. So whether we agreed, disagreed, that's what we did.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, I have a creation story too that I was telling Monica earlier this morning I might share with you, because it has a lot to do with why I as an individual care about this issue deeply, and how I just began to think about the world and the politics in America. So my mom and dad were Canadian immigrants. They migrated here right after they married and had all 4 of their children, me being the last when they moved here. And so they really valued the vote. When you're an immigrant to a new country, adopting a new country, and you finally go through that process and get the vote, it's a big deal. And I was telling Monica, my mom and dad, my mom was born in 1915, and my dad was born in 1910. That was before women got the vote in America, right? So think about that. And so Mom grew up at a time when women having the vote was still kind of a deal, a big deal. So they always voted. Like, the message that came clear and through to me was, you vote. It is a simple duty. You never let an election go by. You vote. Who you vote for, well, that's up to you. That's private. It's private. That was the house I grew up in, Mom and Dad sort of leaned left until I was about 17 or 18, and then they leaned right for the rest of their lives. So politics just felt fluid to me in that environment, and not tribal. It was, I'm going to look at this particular candidate, and I like them because blah, 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 not because they're a Democrat or because they're a Republican. I marvel at this to this day. Mom and Dad would get in the car on election day. They would drive to the polls together. They would get out and vote. They would get back in the car. They would drive home and come in the house and make dinner. And they wouldn't tell each other who they voted for. And you'd find out like a week later, Mom would be chuckling that they might have split their vote. It was fun. It wasn't life or death. And their friends would come over, and they would chide each other as part of the conversation about who they were voting for. And I remember chuckles and laughs, and it wasn't vituperative. It wasn't identity. So I have watched this country evolve into something I don't even recognize in terms of how we treat each other. And so, yeah, as an American citizen, I've been very, very concerned about this.
Yeah, and the crux for me was being in Seattle, and the election had just happened in 2016. The conversations in Seattle, me and many of my fellow liberals, very afraid, very nervous, really scared for the future of the country. But when the conversation would go toward the people who voted for Trump, the sometimes very subtle condescensions and stereotypes and assumptions and projections, and I felt it in my gut that I started to take it personally. And I wondered if something was wrong with me. Why am I taking it personally? And you'd think it would have been obvious, but it wasn't for a little while, that I was taking it personally because they were talking about my parents. And I love my parents, and my parents are very good people. And I've had conversations with them about their political choice. And seeing it all boiled down to, well, they must be crazy, stupid, or evil, just flattens us so much, so much. And I just looked around at that environment and said, like, I don't even know where to begin to peel back the layers of this. But I know that when we put other people in boxes before we've even known them, or asked any questions, even of where did those boxes come from? Why did we make those boxes for people and then jail them in there? We're not even seeing each other. We're not hearing each other. How can we possibly know what we're actually debating? And all the social science research I started looking into, confirming that we're living in funhouse mirrors everywhere. We can't even really see. So that, it's like an epidemic of blindness.
Right.
We're so divided, we're blinded. So it's about so much more than than bridging divides. It's about, can we see our world clearly at all so that we can be effective citizens and communities in it?
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a version of a question that you asked a panel that you moderated in July at the National Governors Association conference. And it went something like this. What to you is off about how Americans treat each other? What is off about today versus 30 years ago or whenever? Can we describe it? I mean, yes, I certainly think a part of it is this assumption. You're trying to feel each other out when you've met a stranger. You know, is this someone that thinks like me or not like me? And do I even go there? And if I go there, how far do I go there? And if I realize they're not simpatico with me politically, what does that leave for us to discuss?
Yeah.
You know, there's something off, that it has become the be-all and end-all and identity of what we are, when we are so much more than that. I keep thinking, you know, we have 99% in common with any other American, but we focus on the 1% where we're different. And anything you focus on, you make really big.
There's so many things. It's really hard to answer that with one or two things. What's coming to mind for now, as I think about it, is we live in a really reactive time, and the level of risk that seems to permeate, you know, the choice to say what we really think or ask the questions that are actually coming up in our minds is too high. And at the same time, the level of trust, it's like this well underneath our whole society that's drying up. And so it's this high risk, it's also high fear. I mean, you've brought this up already, that it seems, you know, identity's playing a role in all these things. And part of it is, there are some really critical issues that are challenging us. The last, I don't know how many years have been, you know, transformative. Lots of norms are being upended culturally. The, you know, social media and the publishing revolution means that a lot of voices are given a lot of space to express themselves. And so in a lot of ways, we're seeing the conflicts that were always there, but now they're out. And so they're scary, because all these clashes, like, things get messy, you know, and rhetorically bloody, and we just go, ugh, right? I do believe, though, at the end of all of that, I do believe that there's something about these clashes that could be good for us. That it means that there's some things that we can no longer ignore. We're hearing from groups that have been at the margins, and, you know, now we're really surfacing the fault lines. I think the 2016 election did that for our country. If we look at it very generously, it's like, well, you can't turn a blind eye toward folks who feel unseen, neglected, left behind. But, you know, what it's resulted in some ways is all these groups going, I'm the one that's the most left behind. I'm the one that's the most left behind. And it's like, where do we begin to untie it? So there's no surprise there that identity has become such a key piece of it. Everything feels like an existential threat. We're sorting ourselves into like-minded groups, but then all of these demographic traits are all stacking on two columns, right? If you are religious, if you live in a rural environment, it's so much more likely you'll be conservative. And if you're urban and you're a person of color, it's so much more likely you'll be urban. or you'll be Democrat. And so all that means is that our like affiliation with ourselves just gets compounded. So when someone disagrees with our opinion, they are a threat to us. And I don't think, because we're so reactive, I mean, how many of you like scroll through social media, right? And then you do it for a few minutes and then you stop and you're anxious and you don't know why.
Right.
What did you read that triggered that? Who knows? Who knows? It's all coming at us so fast. Our ability to reflect and even notice is compromised. So So I heard you mention something about research that I believe Braver Angels had conducted recently about how Americans feel about the polarization of the country, like how concerned they are and how worried they are that we've lost our civic debate muscle. Yeah, it's a muscle, right? You have to exercise it to keep it in good shape, and we've lost it. So, you said it was a big number. It was like something over 80% of Americans would self-report that they feel very concerned about the polarization of America, but no one really knows what to do about it. Right.
So I think that is a way to maybe get into, what do you do about this, right? Is it really about changing anybody's mind? Or is it about changing what's going on inside of you and how you're thinking about the world?
And the thing is, to change other people's minds, we have a lot of mistaken beliefs about how that happens. I think our language is broken around it. When we say, I changed your mind, that's impossible. You change your mind.
Right.
All persuasion is self-persuasion, and that's quoting an author, David McRaney, who wrote a book called How Minds Change that is fantastic. I highly recommend it. But it's true, all persuasion is self-persuasion. The way to influence other people, I mean, what people do is they have a story, and there's a path they have walked to their point of view. Their opinion has deep roots. We don't see with our eyes, we see with our whole lives, with our biographies, right? And sometimes it feels like we think that here's this reason that was compelling to me for why I believe what I believe, and all I have to do to change your mind is give you this reason. And what I expect is that you will change your mind because it means a lot to me, it'll mean a lot to you, as if we're all the same container. And then when you don't change your mind, I'm shocked. I'm just shocked. Something must be wrong with you. And this is the trap we're in, right? But the container, we are all such different people, and different arguments and reasons are gonna land with us in different ways. The book is called I Never Thought of It That Way because when we have I never thought of it that way moments, when we think or say, never thought of it that way, that's a sign that something has maybe landed with us. But it planted a seed, but the seed could get dug out of the ground the next day, or it could change you could end up changing your mind on something incredible, and it might take years, it might take days, who knows? But I think we sense that. But it's this idea that if you actually want to change other people's minds, the most effective route to do that is to understand them, to hear them out, to do what at Braver Angels we call the pivot when the right moment comes, which is, okay, so what I hear you saying is this. Did I get that right? Okay. I see it differently. Can I tell you what I mean? Sure, you get that buy-in. Now you tell your story and your path. So the way you influence someone else's, or the way I change my mind is when I tell myself a new story that points me to a new conclusion. But I tell myself a new story that fits me better. I'm only going to tell myself a new story if it fits me better. And so if you tell me a story about you that I relate to, and I go, I can make a little course correction here because what you said really impacted me. And that's it.
Or I just saw my own humanity in you.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, relate before
and
debate.
I see your
right?
humanity in me,
Yeah.
So
that's it. We skip that step of understanding. I can't influence you if you don't feel like I understand you. All you're doing is defending yourself to me. And what we're really having is proxy battles over the question, do I matter?
Right. Yeah, I've also heard you talk about this idea that we have that, we've got better facts. You know, so you're talking to someone that disagrees with you politically, and you say, look, I'm just going to send you this article. Like, if you just read this article,
God, I hate that.
you know? I mean, I think it'll just change your mind.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's not, would it change your mind if they did the same? It's not about not disagreeing. We're in a free society, and if you're in a free society, you're going to have different opinions, all right? It's not about not disagreeing, it's about disagreeing better and not having to convince everybody you're right. And I'll tell you, for someone like me, that was a hard lesson. That was a hard lesson to learn. But this whole idea that, in fact, if you present your better facts, it probably reduces your power to persuade the other person of the validity of your point of view. You've actually done your argument harm.
Yep.
In terms of how it now lands on others.
Yeah, it all depends on how you bring up those things. And too many people bring them up right at the beginning to change the other person because they're angry and they don't, you said acceptance. There's no, this is the most radical thing of all. When I encounter someone who I strongly disagree with, and I may even think that they believe something that's really bad, if I really want to have a conversation that is not condescending, where we can really hear each other out, I must accept them. That doesn't mean I agree with their idea, but it means that I have to accept them as they are, because if I don't, at least in the beginning, at least as people, right? We know that we're more than the sum of our opinions, guys. You know, on social media, it feels like we're just walking opinions, because we are. We're disembodied things or thoughts. You know, it's terrible. But in real life, we are so much more than that. So that is the most radical thing of all. And I'll tell a quick story, because not long ago I learned for the first time how deeply wounded my mom felt when I told her when I was a teenager. I was in the back of the car, she told me, she was driving, I didn't remember any of this, where I told her I was pro-choice. And she had just started working at like a abortion counseling clinic, a Catholic abortion counseling clinic for women who were not sure. And she saw women go through agony, right? She saw a lot of things, and when she heard her daughter say, I'm pro-choice, and this is the way it should be, she said she couldn't sleep for days, because she is a woman who, and I love this about her, always wants to do the right thing. And so she was kept up at night going, I have to change my daughter. I have to change my daughter's mind, because she thinks a horrible, immoral thing. And she's told me, you know, it took days, and then it took years, and she's still not okay with the fact that I'm pro-choice. But she's gotten used to it. She said she found this way of saying, I accept my daughter for who she is, and if she ever changes, she will have to be the one to change. And so all I can do is present to her what this deeply means to me when the moments are right, and that's it. And I've really appreciated that.
Yeah. So let's get back to acceptance for just a moment. And you know, I've really been trying to put into practice the lessons of your book, and had an experience recently I was telling you about earlier, where I was on an airplane.
This is so cool.
So this was 2 weeks ago. I was flying out to Sedona, and I had a Monica Guzman moment. I mean, I was actually saying to myself, this is the Monica Guzman moment. I can't wait to tell her. So I got on the plane, and this fellow came and sat in the middle seat. I was in the aisle seat. And he immediately, I could tell, wanted to talk, and we did spend most of the trip talking. Actually, he spent most of the trip talking to me, because he was an evangelical Christian who wanted to evangelize me. And I thought, okay, in a former life, Eileen would have just shut that off, right? I don't want to be evangelized. But in this new view, it feels like a door sort of been cracked open, all right? I said, I'm gonna listen to this and not worry about it. It's not gonna hurt me. It's not a threat to me. He wants to talk about it. I was actually raised in a very Catholic family, so I know my Bible. He was, you know, talking about all these Bible stories, these incredible lessons. And I'll tell you, after an hour of this, the thought dawned on me that that man had spent more time on his faith and how it aligned with his life and how it gave him a meaningful path forward that gave him comfort, purpose. I was totally impressed. And I let him know that, so I started to share some of my personal spirituality with them, and he listened to me, But I was telling Monica earlier, I could tell that he was not trusting. Like there was something about me that was bothering him. So I just in conversation, I was saying, well, I'm going to Sedona to visit with friends. What are you going for? And he said, work. Yeah, like some of the answers were just very like, I'm not really going to tell you what I'm doing, right? And the thought occurred to me, it was a trust issue. So I didn't ask him his name, and I didn't offer him my name. But at the end, we had a really nice conversation because I was just going to listen, and this changed the energy between us. And when the plane landed and was at the gate, but the door hadn't opened, I stood up and moved into the aisle waiting for the door to open, and he was having some physical difficulties. He was really, really uncomfortable sitting for that long. So he stood up, but he had to bend over because, the luggage cabbie was above you. So I moved into the aisle a little bit and said, just, come on this way so you can stand up straight. So I had to just sort of move in a little bit to give him the room. At which point, he turned to me and he said, Rick. Oh. Held out his hand and gave me his name. And I did the same thing back to him. And I thought, that is a Monica Guzman moment. And I wanted to tell her this morning because I didn't get to the point where we had a substantive discussion on our politics, okay? I got to the point where we interacted as human beings in a country that is hugely divided. And I was proud of that. I thought, that's a good first step in this, right? I'm going to learn from that. So, yes, sheer acceptance, like acceptance. It doesn't threaten you. It's not going to diminish you to listen to someone that you disagree with. That was a lesson for me.
I love that you literally made space. He was uncomfortable, and
I did.
Literally made space. We talk about that figuratively. But you're going into the aisle going, this guy needs something.
Yeah.
I love that story. A lot of times people ask me, because it's a very legitimate and frequent concern and difficulty with all of this, what do you do when you're curious and the other person is not? Or you're practicing curiosity, you're the one asking all the questions, they're just talking at you. And I have a lot to offer, that situation. But what your story reminded me of is that sometimes, because you said you were thinking about spirituality in your own life.
Right.
So you were deeply curious about spirituality. And so the fact that he did most of the talking happened to be okay. You were learning from him.
It was great.
And not only that, what we forget is that when we have a conversation with another person, there's two conversations happening. The conversation with the other person and the conversation with yourself.
That's right.
So your conversation with yourself was informed and illuminated and enlightened by this conversation with the other person. And I hadn't like stressed that piece of it as much. And then if you're wondering, a little bit of the other piece, what do you do when it's so unreciprocal? A lot of people think, well, I can't have that conversation with that person unless they learn how to be curious and they follow these methods and it's this whole science. It's like, no, this is just about being human. There's no degrees in this. And curiosity is contagious. There's research on intellectual humility and what's called receptivity that's been done, a lot of it recently, and it's fabulous. One study that I love is about subjects who were asked to bring to mind someone in their lives who tends to receive their ideas well, not agree with them, but receive them well, becomes more intellectually humble, meaning that they're less likely to cling to their ideas because they're theirs and they're more willing to consider alternate perspectives, which is just incredible. But we also know that if I use what's called hedging language when I talk about my opinion, instead of, this is this, it's, as I think about it right now, I really feel strongly that this, but what do you think? And you tack on that kind of flexible hedging language, the other person is more likely to adopt that same language with you, which makes the whole conversation more flexible and curious. We also know that if I spend time listening to you, it is much more likely that you will spend time listening to me. And you do that thing called the pivot I was talking about before. But, this is how, it only takes one. It only takes one person in the conversation to practice curiosity for that to become the tone. No guarantees, right? And I will say one other thing because it's important. A lot of times, we'll talk to someone who politically disagrees with us and they just want to talk at us and they're not asking us questions and we wonder why, we think they're not curious. But sometimes what happens is maybe that person hasn't been heard out by anyone or in a long time. Maybe you to them represent the other side. And so there's this listening debt, They're putting you in a box. You are every conservative in the world. You are every liberal in the world. And you have not been hearing him. So it's going to take a while before he feels heard. And you can't control how long that will take. So there's a little bit of courage and patience, I think. Well, we just can't control other people. All we can do is what we can do.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're talking about there is what emerges, like what are the emergent properties of a conversation where someone is, or both, are consciously practicing curiosity. What is the quality of what emerges from those kinds of conversations? And I think it's a very great deal. I think it's meaningful. And what I had to get over was, this is such a massive issue, it's evolved over decades, and can my one little conversation with this one person, I think it can. Not because it's changed the world, but because it's changed me. And I think that's enough.
Yeah, I really like that. At Braver Angels workshops, we often ask at the end, what did you take away? What did you learn from the workshop? And there's this sense that some people haven't really been in spaces where they witness generously people on the other side of something speak about what brought them to their beliefs. And when they do that, when they have that experience of witnessing generously another person do that, live on Zoom or in person, then what you ask yourself is, I'm so wrong. I was so wrong about people who believe this and where it comes from. What else am I wrong about? So just one conversation, one experience with someone where you see the deeper complexity is enough to get you to question your assumptions more in other contexts. And that is the radical act. Because really what we are is we're jailed by our assumptions. And the reason we are is because we don't even notice them most of the time. So in order to get curious, you have to notice what you think you've already answered for yourself. But most of the time, you haven't answered. You have assumptions, which are the minions of certainty. And certainty is the archvillain of curiosity. If you think you know, you won't think to ask. You'll never ask the questions because you think you have the answers. But you don't know this person. You don't know. You've just read a thought piece that you decided told you everything you needed to know, and it's not true. So you have to notice the assumption, turn it into a question, and just check those misperceptions with the reality. I say in the book, whoever is underrepresented in your life will be overrepresented in your imagination. And your imagination is not a source of truth. It just isn't. We have to, no matter how educated you think you are, no matter how informed you think you are, if you are not informed about people, if you're not informed about people's perspective, you're missing something really big.
You had a great example of just that in the book, the Melting Mountains event. So for those of you who read the book, that you may remember this, but for those of you who didn't, Monica and another one of her colleagues in Seattle put together a busload of Seattle folks who were interested in having this kind of conversation with folks that probably voted differently than they did. I think it was from the 2016 election. So you actually looked at what the mirror image of how blue Seattle was in that election to how red this other county in Oregon was. So they all got on a bus and went to that county and had their counterparts in that county, where these group of citizens from two entirely different areas, one very blue, one very red, sat down for a day and had a conversation. And the way you described, I forget the fellow's name, but he was from the Oregon County, and he was talking about this particular kind of water rights. He was a farmer. He was like a third or fourth generation farmer. And water is everything, right? You have to have water, you can't have a farm. And there are these certain kinds of places where water gatherers that aren't federally yet fully regulated, but could be, right? And if that ever happens, like, there goes the farm, And people in Seattle were, the way you described it, they were all leaning in, like, wait a minute, what are these water rights? What is this? He was explaining why he didn't vote for the Dem, right? Because he didn't think that administration was going to fully appreciate the meaning of this for his farm and his family. And just the way you described the folks in Seattle leaning in, like understanding something for the first time. Oh, that makes sense. Like, you're not some irrational, awful person. You have a reason for voting when you want to vote.
Right. And this gets to one of the most pernicious assumptions that we make in politics and political disagreements is, if you oppose what I support, you must hate what I love. And where that comes from is, we believe that the variables that went into the formula that calculated our political choice, those are the only variables there are, right? So in the case of folks from Seattle, several of them thought, well, gosh, we're going to this Trump-supporting county, and I voted against Trump because of LGBTQ rights, because of the environment. And so they must have voted for Trump because they hate LGBTQ rights and they don't want to protect the environment. But that's assuming it's this cognitive fallacy called what you see is all there is. That's not all there is. And so by going and talking to folks, we ended up learning that this federal regulation called the Waters of the United States Rule, which regulates at what point the federal government can claim that a body of water is now sort of a public body of water. Some of these farms, they have all these valleys, and if you have a hard rainstorm, a pond appears one day and it wasn't there the day before. Can the government come and claim my land? You would think this would be absurd. It's not. There's been really close calls in the agricultural world. So yeah, like, a lot of these farmers were like, yeah, because of that and how my business operates at the margins, I had to vote for Trump. That's a businessman. He'll get this. Republicans get this. Democrats don't. So there's a variable that people from Seattle had absolutely no stinking clue that was important.
Right. Yeah, the minute you learn something about someone and the reason they've done something and their experience around it, it changes your opinion of them.
Right.
So let's talk about who benefits from the polarization of America. Because I think it's instructive to understand it as one of the barriers to overcoming it. Who benefits from our polarization? I mean, certainly politicians do in many ways, right? They benefit from the divisions, and so they amplify them. Not all, not by any means, but they do, right? And the media, all right, so the media is business. And they want eyes on their content.
Yep.
And if the Wall Street Journal starts sounding like the New York Times, or the New York Times starts sounding like the Wall Street Journal, they're going to lose their readership, right? So they benefit from the divisions too. So we've got profit motives and power motives at work.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of payoff. Things that end up being sticky systems that people say they disagree with the outcomes, they're designed to do what they're designed to do, and there's a lot of payoff. So you mentioned for politicians, it's much... Okay, to tell a parallel story, when I studied cinema in college, I ended up writing a horror movie. It was really cool, and they produced it, and it was fun. But what I learned through that process, and also being a horror movie fan, is that fear is the cheapest emotion. Horror movies are the cheapest movies to produce, and you get the biggest emotional bang for your buck. The media know this, politicians know this. If you get people afraid, if you get them outraged, you can mobilize them. You can get them to do things, right? So yeah, the higher the stakes, the higher the dial on the stakes, and the more that you can align yourself with being sort of the savior, then that's a cheap emotion to drive up. Now, I was in media, I still am, for many years, and it's remarkable. Even I have to see my own complicity. Because I'm sitting there going, I'm a journalist because I want a more informed citizenry. I want to help people understand each other. This is why I do what I do. But I remember the month where I wrote what was called the big blog, and I was tasked with just getting trending stories. That's it. Getting trending stories, getting to the top of Google News so that we get a lot of hits about whatever it takes. Culture, it doesn't matter. That was my job. I got really good at it. And there was one month where the Cops reporter, because the Cops blog was also very popular in Seattle, we decided to compete for page views. And newsroom reporters started actually placing bets. And there was a whiteboard with how many page views we were getting every day. And we learned all the tricks, you guys. The words that you include in the headline to get people to hack your psychology and get you to click. That's what mattered to us, Media is really good at this. But also, let's have some empathy, right? Media, the way you survive in media is to have a really loyal audience you serve very well. The easiest way to serve a very loyal audience is to have a narrow audience. And then the way that you tell that audience and signal to them, I'm with you, you should be with me, is to affirm a lot of their beliefs. Or at least when you challenge them, do it very carefully. And so even some of our biggest news organizations are trapped by this because it's very, very hard at this point to have a true pluralistic media because of this reactivity that we've become so used to. Same with politicians. It's just cheaper. It's easy to fundraise off of outrage. It's easy to fundraise off of fear.
And I think awareness is everything. If you're aware of who benefits, then suddenly you start seeing its movement in our society, in our culture. Awareness is everything. Without it, there's no hope you're going to deconstruct any of this.
So true.
But with it, you actually have hope that you're going to figure out what are these influences on me? Why have I become what I've become when my parents were not this? What's happened? It's really important to deconstruct that.
So can I cap that off?
Yeah.
With like two hopeful things, tactical things to come out of that. The only newsletter that I read on the regular is called The Flip Side. It's a 5-minute read every weekday. They pick one political issue, and they have liberals and conservatives that go out and find the best commentary on that issue from the left and the right. And in 5 minutes, you read the best, strongest arguments from the left and the right. Cannot tell you how wonderful that's been for my understanding of the issues in the debates. I'll read, sometimes they put the blue side up top, that's my side. I'll read the blue side and I'll go, yeah, geez, what does the red side have to say to this? Oh my God. And then I'll read the red side and I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that's a good point. Oh, shoot, you're right. And I do this every single day. So that's the media side. And then for politics, I just quickly want to tell you, so I launched a podcast called A Braver Way. Check it out. And one of our latest episode was with the governor of Utah, the Republican governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, and the leading LGBTQ rights activist in the state of Utah, a man named Troy Williams. There's one moment where, and they talk about how they've been able to disagree better, and there's one moment where Troy talks about, he's the head of this organization called Equality Utah, LGBTQ rights organization. They have this culture in Equality Utah where they do not use dehumanizing labels to label the opponents of what they fight for. And the reason, he said, is because those things may not even be true, and I don't want to jail people in a label that they might not, that they could evolve out of. If I call them this, then I'm not allowing them to evolve out of it. A phobe or a hater or a whatever, a fascist or whatever the label happens to be. And man, that was cool. So I just want to say that because there are politicians and there are activists and there are people who get it. And we need to elevate their examples.
In fact, the videotape of Monica moderating a panel at the National Governors Association conference this past summer is available online. And I'll tell you, that gave me hope. Here are all these governors, red states, blue states, and they're all tired. They just look tired. They're done with the partisanship, and they want to find a better way. You can see it in their faces, and you can hear it in their voices. So I think that's hopeful, One of your panelists, I can't remember whether it was Tim Shriver or the fellow from the American Enterprise Institute, used the phrase conflict entrepreneurs.
Oh, yeah.
again, getting back to the question of who benefits.
Yeah, I think we need to be really honest about that. So conflict entrepreneur, it's a term coined by Amanda Ripley, who wrote a wonderful book called High Conflict. Highly recommend that book. But yes, there's plenty of folks who have figured out how to make a lot of money and get a lot of power from making sure that things are stirred up. I mean, all you have to do is take a look at X, formerly known as Twitter, and just see, you know, a lot of people have built up giant profiles. And again, like me and the cop reporter competing for your clicks, it's the same kind of thing. These platforms incent a certain type of behavior and outrage and all of that. So the solution, the way Amanda Ripley puts it, is marginalize the conflict entrepreneurs. Put them on the margins. What that really means is that you have to look inside yourself and in your own psychology and choose very intentionally to change what you pay attention to.
Exactly. It goes back to awareness, right? What am I a puppet on this person's string today? Exactly. What is my reaction to what I've just heard? And whose whose puppet am I a string on? Who am I mimicking today? Instead of thinking about my own judgment here, bringing my own thoughts.
And that's the thing, the more consumed we are, if you ever get obsessed, there's that famous XKCD comic on the internet, online, it's like somebody just, are you coming to bed? No, someone is wrong on the internet. How we just get consumed, right? Who benefits? Not you. There you are, like sick with anxiety. There you are not paying attention to the people around you. Your family, there you are being distant. There you are thinking all the problems of the world are for you to do something about, and this is how I am a good person. And it's like, yeah, but is that really effective? Is that an effective use of your time? And I think that's really hard because I've been there.
I have too.
A lot of people have been there.
Absolutely.
I still get there sometimes.
Yep. And I think the discussion about who benefits then is a nice segue into, okay, now that we understand who benefits, how do we fix this?
Yeah.
How do we fix this? So I was sharing with Monica again this morning that I read an op-ed article in the summer of 2021 by a guy by the name of Michael Gerson, who has since passed. Michael was an op-ed columnist with the Washington Post for many, many years, and I tell you, this was a moment I'll never forget. I was sitting in my kitchen, worried as always about America and what was happening to us, but never in a million years thinking the Community Foundation had any role to play in this, and what role could a Community Foundation possibly have to play in this? And I opened up the paper, and I'm reading the op-ed that Michael Gerson writes, and it's entitled, "We Need a National Effort at Civic Healing." And he's talking about the country in the early 1900s, when industrialization and urbanization was just tearing the place apart, when pandemics were ripping through cities, health, emergencies everywhere, immigrants pouring over the border, about which Americans at the time felt very ambivalent. Sound familiar? Who fixed it? According to him, in this op-ed, which you can still get online, it was the grassroots. It was the grassroots that stood up. So the very first community foundation came into being in 1914. Very first settlement houses, very first Boys and Girls Club. He called them institutions of renewal. And they rebuilt the fiber of society. The grassroots. I think we're at another grassroots moment.
No kidding.
When you consider who benefits from the divisions, all right, who is going to rebuild? Who is going to reinforce the ties that bind? It's us.
Yep. I think one of the things we don't often see, the conventional thought to have is that media as an institution, the leaders there, politicians as an institution, the leaders there, they're the ones that have to change. They're the ones that have to change first. Because who am I? I'm just little. I got nothing to say here. It's not going to matter. It's flipped. Those institutions are mirror institutions. They take their cues from us. They are trapped into their incentives because of us. We like to think that we don't play a part in this. Of course we do. Our psychology plays a huge part in this, right? Our reactions, the ways that we have taken our eyes off the path, right? And just kind of reacted to this world where we're being thrown around everywhere. It has to start with us. And it may feel small, but it's really not. It's a light that goes off, at this dinner table and at that meeting and in this city council, and just boom, 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 boom. So I am convinced that this is a grassroots movement. This is local up. Because local is the place where we have bodies. We can get together. You're all here in the room, If we were on social, it cannot possibly happen there. It has to happen here. And we have to bring into those spaces the awareness of our full humanity.
Yeah. In fact, your book very consciously has as its audience us, everyday ordinary people. That was the audience for your book. You wrote it for us. What we can do, not wait for others to do, what we can do every single day, what we can do. But it does start with that moment where you look in the mirror and you say, you're part of the problem.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because we usually skip that.
Yeah, right.
It's somebody else that has to change, not me.
Without that, you're nowhere. So you wrote this book a couple of years ago. It's really caught on. You said you thought the book tour was going to be 3 or 4 months, and it turns out it's more like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And wondering if your thinking, your activism, the thing that you're focusing on in this particular field has evolved since you wrote the book. In what way, and what might be next for you?
It's evolved a lot. I have so many notes. One of the reasons we're having this chat, I often get asked to give lectures, and I say no. I don't want to come to where you are and just talk at you. That's not the way this works. I want to learn from you. And so what's happened is I've collected so many more stories. One of the ways it's evolved is I've really become kind of obsessed with the connection between truth and trust. And I've come to understand, really believe that you can't access truth without trust. And that what we have to engage in our communities and nation is a collective search for truth. But it begins with recognizing that as long as we think only our side has the truth, it's not collective. It's not. We have to search together. One of the things that taught me that is Braver Angels Debates. Braver Angels Debates is our signature program, and it's a divisive issue, really divisive. And speakers for and against a resolution meant to, provoke a lot of thought. But the point is not to declare a winner.
Right.
The point is to make sure that each side can truly hear the other. And the structure of it is designed that way. And I've seen extraordinary trust built when people spend time in those kinds of environments. Again, when you listen to the other point of view generously, and you ask yourself, you're not looking for ammo, to affirm how horrible they are or how you're going to attack them next time you see them. But instead you go, what deep down honest concerns inform this person's view of this? What is the strongest argument on the other side? So yeah, I don't think we can access truth without trust. And so we keep putting the cart before the horse. Let me see if I remember kind of the way that I sum this up. We believe it. We want people to affirm our truth before they can earn our trust. But what if we want people to affirm our truth before they can earn our trust, but what if it takes trust? Now I got it. So sorry. I just want to make sure this is in my head. We want people to affirm a shared reality before they can earn our trust, but it takes trust to build a true shared reality. So as long as we're caught in that, my facts over your facts, your facts are just proof that you don't care about truth, therefore you're evil, therefore I'm at war with you, that kind of thing. There is misinformation and there is disinformation, but let's please understand, this is so important. Misinformation thrives, not because people love lies or whatever, but it's because there's something in there that reflects people's real concerns. They want to believe it because it's speaking to them, it's relating to them, and most likely some of that misinformation is surfacing some concern that other more responsible media isn't. And so they feel seen. People feel seen by misinformation. That's why they believe it, right? And that's a product of a society that doesn't know how to hear itself. If we really hear each other and don't just push each other away, misinformation has no purchase. It can't connect. But what we're doing is we're playing whack-a-mole on platforms and just going like, stomp that out. We think it's helping. It's making everything worse. I cannot say this enough, and sometimes it's hard for me to really be really bold about it, because even in journalism, there's such a strong culture of, no, there's a war on truth, and what we have to do is keep people from saying their concerns if it could span misinformation. It's like, no, what we have to do is listen to each other. In contained spaces, the one-to-one conversation that builds trust. Stop doing this on social media, please. It's just killing us.
Yeah.
Okay, now I've just really gotten myself riled up.
So why don't you folks can start thinking about questions you may want to ask of Monica. We've left some cards and pens at your table, so you can start writing them down, and our staff will pick them up. But before we get to your questions, I just thought I'd ask one more question that Michael Gerson's op-ed actually addressed, and it's about cynicism. You know, what do you say in the face of cynicism, of people saying braver angels? Are you kidding me?
Oh yeah.
You know, this little grassroots thing is going to make a difference. It's going to depolarize America. And I'll just share with you what Michael Gerson said about that in his op-ed. He said, you know, all these efforts that the grassroots could make, for example, a mandatory year of national service, or ranked choice voting, and he mentioned another option in this op-ed, sounds like do-gooderism, you know? He said, but let me stand in defense of American do-gooderism as a defining characteristic of Americans. And he said, make no mistake about it, civic healing is not possible. It will not happen without some level of civic idealism. And that to me was a call to be brave. I don't think it's do-gooderism on steroids. I think it's hope. Really? I think it's just hope that things can get better if we want it to. Wondering if you've given that some thought. You know, Braver Angels has thought about it. You might have heard some disparaging comments that are cynical in nature about the effort.
Yeah, no, cynicism, I look at as sort of it can be kind of a coping mechanism. It's a way, there's a lot of sort of learned helplessness out there about what's going on, and cynicism is a way to seem strong in the face of it. You know, to say, well, there's nothing that can happen anyway, and so it's just a waste of my time. But I really think that comes out of a deep belief of one's lack of power. And so, you know, what I really truly believe is, why would we think that? Of course we have power. We know we do. We each have power. So it begins with flipping that inside your own heart and see the power you really have. That the barriers between us are lower than we think. That, you know, humans can adapt and transform and change things in extraordinary ways. But it does begin with a kind of faith.
And hope.
And hope. You have to believe. But hope is not just blind faith. You know, hope is you have a game plan. You have a clear goal. And at Braver Angels, we see it. We see it in practice. This isn't just a white paper or a theory. There have been so many lives changed. Oh gosh, there's one story at the end of each of my podcast episodes. You hear like a 5-minute profile of someone who, in their own words, tells you their story of transformation across the divide. And one woman, Janice, talks about how with her aging father, she used to go and see him to help him after his wife had died. And she would walk in his home, and she was liberal, and she would hear Fox News playing. And she realized later it would make her so irritable and irritated. And her father would sense that irritation. And they would start to fight and gripe, and it would escalate. And then she would have to go stay at a hotel because it would get so bad. And this happened over and over and over again. And then she met, through Braver Angels in Washington State, a woman, Sulani Madsen, who's conservative. And at one day said something about a conservative position where Janice realized, oh, that actually makes sense. And my father has said that, So slowly, she started to kind of work on her own reactions. And then she started walking into her father's house without getting irritated about what was on Fox News. And then she developed an incredible relationship with him. And then he died. Right before, she feels like she got a little bit of time to be as close to her father as she ever could be. So these are about personal transformations too. This is about finding connection and joy in your own life. There's so many broken families that want repair in one way or another, and they think it's about the other person changing. And maybe some of it is, but all we can do is work on ourselves.
Well, I think that's one of the things that's gotten our attention is the suffering we've all felt because we've lost friends or family members because of this, you know. All right, so here's a question from the audience. How do you interact with someone whose faith or politics literally means they don't believe in your right to exist?
Yes. Man, this one's really important and really, really big and really deep. I think about folks who have asked this question from being LGBTQ, from being trans, from being any identity that feels, you know, severely under threat in policy making and other kinds of places. One thing is, and we haven't said this yet, and it's really important, that whether or not to engage in a conversation is a completely personal choice, and I don't believe any of this is a universal prescription. You know, we're up here talking about as if it's really easy. It's technically easy and psychologically quite difficult, depending on who you are, what the particular issue means to you, what it means to the other person, the divide that you're really in. It's extraordinarily personal. So there is this tension for folks who feel that they occupy a threatened identity between being safe and being seen. And that's, I think, the animating tension. You know, being safe means I don't want to have to deal with this stuff. I don't want to feel under threat. I don't want to feel even rhetorically like I'm in danger or I have to justify myself to someone. If you go too far on the side of being safe, are you seen? What we have all over the world are cultures that are primarily shaped and designed to serve whoever kind of the dominant demographic happens to be in that part of the world. And we know that, right? And as generations change and norms change and people change, well, the only way that the cultures are going to reflect those people is if they participate and they engage and they show up. But again, there's this tension between being safe and being seen. So I think folks with marginalized identities, you know, some of them will not want to engage, and that's fine. But hopefully some of them still can. The other thing about this is, I remember I met a student, she was an immigrant from Africa at Calvin University in Michigan, and she told me this incredible story. She was at a wedding in Michigan, right? And she's black, and she's sitting at a table next to an older white man who kind of out of nowhere starts to talk about immigration and how frustrated he is with people like you coming in and doing these things. And she's just like, whoa, what? Just out of nowhere. And, you know, she's just kind of sitting there, kind of polite, but she thinks to herself, I'm not here for this. I'm at a wedding. I don't need to be here, right? Doesn't engage really at all other than just like being kind of civil, I guess. And then stands up and goes dancing and says, I'm just going to dance. Later, the same man comes up to her and apologizes and says, I'm so sorry. I think there's something about your being here that got stuff going in my head. I clearly have a lot of things I need to kind of ask myself and deal with. And I was very disrespectful to you, and I really apologize. And among the many shocking things about that anecdote is she didn't say anything in her defense, right? We talked about how there's two conversations, the conversation you have with another person and the conversation a person has with themselves. Her existing in his presence was the argument. That was the provocation, right? And he had a conversation with himself that kept going after she got up and left. We don't know the influence we have on others. We always, I think there's a greediness in conversation, right? Like, I want to have a conversation with you and you believe this other thing, and not only do I want to change you, but I want to witness the change within an hour. I want to be there for when you change your mind. What? So I think the best argument against someone who thinks you shouldn't exist is to continue to exist in their presence. Because also, how absurd. I don't think you should exist. Well, guess what? You don't have a say in the matter. I'm existing now. What point does your opinion on my existence have? What possible effect can that? I'm existing. Take it or leave it, man. Like, I don't know how you can leave it. I'm here. So there is an extraordinary, it is one of the gifts of presence, right? And one of the consequences of our sorting ourselves into like-minded groups geographically. Blue zip codes getting blue, or red zip codes getting red, or everyone moving to where they're most comfortable means there's fewer collisions across difference. You know? That get people used to, the way my mother got used to me being pro-choice. We have to get used to difference that may make us uncomfortable. And let's be honest, this is not just some evil people that don't accept people that make them uncomfortable. This is all of us.
Right.
The kinds of people we don't accept is the difference.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a powerful question, right? I mean, how do you confront someone that thinks you shouldn't exist?
Right. And a lot of times the way to do it is to not confront them. And you can't, and it's too much, and it's too hard, and you don't need to have to do it. But hopefully someone else is trying.
Right. I mean, the idea that there's only one way to combat that level of cancellation.
Right.
And that's to simply exist.
Yeah.
You're there.
Keep existing, and don't think that somebody's opinion that you shouldn't exist actually affects your ability to exist.
So the same way words can be an event, like a simple gesture can be an event.
Yeah.
And be a statement.
Definitely.
All right, a couple more questions here. So one of them is, why does someone need to win and someone else lose? I think that's an interesting question because that's where the debate in America has gone. There's got to be a winner and there's got to be a loser, and there's got to be a winner who takes all, takes all. We've lost the ability to compromise.
I mean,
politicians don't get rewarded for compromise nowadays.
There's a reason sports is popular. There's a payoff in competition. There's a payoff in winning and losing. And even if you are the fan of a team that keeps losing, you still get something out of being part of that tribe. We all get a payoff from the contest. It's more interesting. It's sexier. Let's just admit that. That's why one of the reasons we feel we have to win and lose. But the other is because it's tough to be humble because we need to be right. We need to feel right, and we need to feel good about ourselves and our own decisions. So when we run into friction and a challenge, our first instinct is self-defense and survival. And so we need to defeat the other person to feel worthy. And there's this stupid idea out there that if I'm curious, I am weak. That if I engage to generously understand your opinion, I am abandoning my own. That's so backwards, right? If I'm engaging your opinion, even though I have strong views on my own, there's a courage in that. I'm testing it, I'm seeing if there's something I'm missing. And I could emerge with a stronger argument for what I believe, but I also might find a better thing to believe. It's like that. It's that question. I put it in the book. What do you care about more, the truth or your own beliefs? And a lot of us honestly care more about our own beliefs. We want to protect them. But if we believe we care about truth, then we've got to be open to what we might be missing.
You're very solutions oriented. When I read this book, the first phrase that came to mind was, this woman's written a how-to book. It's like how to have these conversations. You're solutions oriented. And I saw it when you were moderating that panel for the National Governors Association. You turned to, what are the solutions here? What are our ideas here for solutions? So in that vein, there's a question here about what efforts that perhaps Braver Angels or you, Monica, have undertaken to create sample questions that can help us engage in better, more curious conversations.
Well, if you go to braverangels.org and poke around, there's a lot of guides. We have a course, an e-course called Skills for Bridging the Divide on Social Media. There's all kinds of materials where you can learn some of the questions that really work. Among the ones that I really think are very effective, maybe the most important is, instead of asking a version of why do you believe what you believe, ask how did you come to believe what you believe. The difference is profound. Across a divide, or whether suspicion or distrust, asking why puts people on the stand, makes them feel defensive. And what they'll do, this is about reasons. What are your reasons? Well, my reasons are the ones that people have been taking shelter under on social media. Those are my reasons. I'm gonna throw them at you. Okay, well, here are my reasons. I'm going to throw them at you. And okay, what do we do now? Well, now we repeat the cycle, except we throw them harder and yell louder until it all blows apart. So instead, asking how did you come to believe what you believe, there's many advantages. You invite people to tell you their story. And you don't have an argument, you take a walk. You take a walk alongside the path that led them to their beliefs. You invite the possibility of relating to their struggles, to their story. And hey, no fake news. This person is the world's reigning expert on their own story. So you do that, and then it's a tour, not a trial. And again, you allow listening to really come through, which, as we know, makes it easier for you to hear each other and you to be able to influence each other, etc. So I think that's one of the most important questions you can ask.
Very good, very good. All right, here's a question that I definitely want to ask. How can we, and perhaps the Community Foundation for Northern Virginia, organize a Braver Angels chapter or session? So we'll have to look into that.
Well, there is, right? There's an alliance in Fairfax? Yes. Excellent. I think a couple of you know about it, so there it is. There already is an alliance in Fairfax.
Is there someone here that's engaged in that?
You know of it, right, Randy?
Right, so I'm a member of DC Alliance.
Oh.
And that alliance works with the Fairfax Alliance, so.
Okay.
Yeah, happy to connect.
Oh. Okay, no, I think we're good. But
Yeah,
yes,
no, that's okay.
Go ahead.
Please give him the microphone.
Yeah.
So yeah, just tell us again so that the people online can hear what you just said, that
Sure.
there is a Braver Angels Alliance here.
Yes,
locally.
there is a Braver Angels Fairfax Alliance, and there's a DC Alliance as well, and those two alliances work together on a regular basis. So they publish one another's calendars for events, and they work together on those. So definitely, if you'd like to connect, please reach out.
Okay, great.
There you go.
I thought since we're passing the microphone, maybe we could just take a few comments from the audience.
Sure.
And in the vein of wanting to end this on a solutions-oriented note instead of all the trouble and all the worry, does anybody have any other thoughts? Did any of the thoughts occur to you during this conversation about, and maybe it's something you've already heard, maybe it's an idea that we hadn't discussed about what we as Americans, everyday, ordinary grassroots Americans can do?
I think that's fascinating. Can I respond to that a little bit?
Please do. Yeah.
I do think that one of the things that time has done, at least in this society, okay, sometimes I have visuals in my head for concepts, so I'll try to explain the visual. I'm imagining like a lot of sort of vertical containers at the basis of society. And each of these vertical containers is kind of like, a community of people who have a particular perspective on something, be it religion or culture or a political issue, whatever, and they're all kind of, and many of them, represent different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different races, different gender, it's all there. And I think that in the past, there have been moments, I think of like Walter Cronkite, people talk reverently about the age where Walter Cronkite did the newscast and it seemed like everything was hunky-dory. But here's the thing, like only some of the lids of those containers were open, right? And so when you had fewer containers, go back far enough, right, before women could vote.
Right.
All right, who was having great discussions? The founding fathers were having excellent discussions, but the fewer of those lids that are open, the easier it is to connect across difference because you have fewer markers of difference. The beautiful opportunity of today is that more of those lids are opening, right? And so we have to hear from all kinds of people with experiences and backgrounds that we didn't consider. And again, that's a beautiful opportunity. It's also an enormous challenge. And what this country represents to me, coming from Mexico and just generally, is we are audacious enough, maybe stupid enough, to keep the experiment in full diversity going. That's hard. But I do think our values call us to that.
Yeah.
So what we have is more of those lids open, more of those voices out, a lot more clashes. It's getting really messy. Identities are getting involved. We're entrenched. There's tribes. It's terrible. But we can still do it. It's just going to take some work. So, and you mentioned, you came and a lot of people don't want to talk about religion. It's because they're trying to keep the peace, and they know that that's going to be really hard. I do think that the more skilled we get at talking about our differences in a way that we're really noticing our own assumptions and questioning them, we should be able to talk about anything. Anything. I'm not saying each individual and each issue at each moment, but we should be able to handle it all. And the danger of not talking about politics or religion as a way of keeping the peace. I'm remembering this woman, Courtney, from the Midwest, who told me when my dad said, I don't want to talk about politics anymore, she felt he doesn't want to see me anymore because there were some political issues that mattered so much to her, and she's working on them so hard that it was a way of saying, I can't see you anymore. And a lot of people make these rules without recognizing that, no, you're blocking off a whole part of somebody. So I want a world that sees itself. And I think you're right. Like, sure, it seemed like there was a lot of civility and diplomacy and whatnot, but it was also because a lot of voices were silent and a lot of perspectives weren't fully explored.
You know, debate is a skill. You know, just throwing your opinion out there is not debating. It takes skill to hear what the other side is arguing, to in your own mind marshal the evidence that you feel you have at hand, and then to present that evidence in a way that is persuasive. It doesn't mean you're going to win, but it means you're going to debate. That takes practice. And I don't know, maybe, you know, our experiences inform our opinions, right? So I grew up in a house where every dinner table was a massive debate about current events. I mean, Mom and Dad were news hounds, and we couldn't sit down. I'd have the first forkful halfway up to my mouth and it would start, you know. Mom would say, what do you think about this? And we'd be off, and we'd sit there for an hour at the dinner table and debate current events. So I think that does color my view of a time when we had a more powerful civic debate muscle going. But it also seemed that the circle of my mom and dad's life did the same thing. It seemed that it was what people did. But again, it was just my experience. And I see some people in the audience nodding and saying, yeah, we did it too. But then again, I remember bringing a friend home from college, and he sat and watched this evolve at the dinner table. And he just looked kind of uncomfortable the whole time. And when it was all over, he goes, do you do that every night? And I said, do what? And he said, that. And I said, well, I guess so. Why? What do you do? He goes, not that. So I guess it was hotter, you know, like it was lively, but I felt like I became good at debate, and actually didn't realize it at the time, but I actually went on to be a trial attorney. I had a 20-year career as an attorney, and 13 of those years I was a trial attorney. I learned how to do that at the dinner table at night, and that's the honest truth.
That's cool.
So I think my opinion there is being colored by my own personal experience about debate.
Yeah, as it should, yeah. Everybody's is.
Yes.
That's wonderful. I have to tell you a story that your comment made me think of. This woman in Oregon, Latina, had graduated college and had her first job, and it was at a marketing agency. And she realized that most of the marketing agency is white and male. And so she was telling me, like, help me, I'm so scared. I'm gonna walk into a place that doesn't understand me and is probably gonna squash me, and that's her mindset, right? And so we ended up chatting about it, and I asked her more questions about her feeling about it, and I just sort of offered a different way to look at it. Like, what if you were to, so you're the only Latina, like, I think so, okay. And it's gonna be a lot of white men in that conference room, like, okay. Well, what if you walk in and you think, aren't they lucky? They get to learn from me. Like, what happens when you come in with a different mindset? You don't know them yet. Do you want to go in thinking you do? Or do you want to go in thinking that they might surprise you? Because chances are your attitude could inspire them to help you feel welcome and to, you know, so it's such a tug of war within ourselves. I'm scared or I'm excited.
Yeah, very, very good. So there's one more question here on social media, and we've talked about it somewhat, but you know, you talk in your book about it's a barrier because it pulls at our desire to be amongst other people that think like us, or it's the sameness, right? This whole birds of a feather phenomenon, you know, that the platforms actually very consciously engage in. So the question is, how do you think social media platforms contribute to the polarization of our country? And what steps can we as individuals take to ensure that our social media interactions are more constructive and less divisive? That's a really, really important question given the prominence of social media today and how long Americans spend on it. It's just a stunning number of hours every day.
Yeah, I mean, they do consume us, and I don't want to just rag on social media. They obviously connect us. It's really wonderful, the kinds of people you find again, the kinds of things that become possible in real life because you are checking in with each other in digital life. Like, most of our interactions are probably pretty good. But research shows that a lot of these platforms, the loudest voices, are not representative of the people out in the world. And so, again, it's a funhouse mirror. The more time you spend on social media, the more you'll misperceive the world. And that's really important to take into account. I mentioned reactivity. Our brains can't be proactive if we spend too much time being reactive. And here we are with our phones and our notifications just taking us away from where we are and giving us this little hits of dopamine. Let me go check what's new. I struggle with that to this day. Like a lot of addiction to Instagram and things, it happens to all of us. So what can we do? I think one of the things we can do is, when it comes to disagreements and contentious conversations, social media are not great platforms for this. And I can give you a couple of reasons. One of those, the embodiment question, right? The internet is a non-place that makes us into non-people. We do not have our bodies. We don't have signals of our complexity and profundity and how our opinions are the result of our experiences. Everyone's billboarding themselves and then building walls. Unfollow me if you think that blah, 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 right? And it's because we want to keep ourselves comfortable online, which is blah. And then what happens is that a contentious conversation will start on social media, and then I think people think that it has to stay on social media. But the best way to continue that conversation is to increase what I call containment. The quality of a conversation that is about how contained is this conversation to the people actually participating in it. A lot of social media spaces are these walled gardens that end up being like panopticons. You have no idea how many people are listening to you. You can't witness their listening, so they might be judging you the whole time. You might post something on social media and lose 3 friends, but you don't know. You don't know. And so you're scared. And so you perform your perspective on social media. You don't actually candidly, humbly explore it. It's almost impossible. So if you want to increase candor and humility and truth, the search for truth, get off social media. One of the best conversations I had with my mom is she posted an article from George W. Bush, something about race. We ended up in a 3-hour phone conversation that night. But it's because I picked up the phone and said, Mom, I saw what you posted on Facebook. Let's talk. And it was awesome. But it was just her and me. She didn't have to worry about her friend so-and-so, right? What she thought about it. So yeah, really keep that in mind. If it stays on social media, it doesn't. If it starts on social media, it does not have to stay there.
So your mom can hold her end of a debate.
Yeah.
3-hour debate.
She's great. We have fun.
That's great. All right, so I thought I would just end with this one tool I discovered by watching the video of Monica at the National Governors Association, and it was something created by an organization called Unite, which Tim Shriver, which was one of your panelists, has created, and it's called the Dignity Index. And it is a tool that is intended to be used by elected officials, all right? So he describes it on the website as it's an 8-point scale that scores speech along a continuum from contempt to dignity. And when I pulled it up on, you can just Google Dignity Index, there are the 8 points. I found it to be a very useful tool. You can just read in 1 or 2 sentences what each of these scores mean, and you can judge the content of your own words against the Dignity Index. So number 1, which is contempt, right, is, quote, they're not even human. It is our moral duty to destroy them before they destroy us. And number 8, which is dignity. Each of us is born with inherent worth, so we treat everyone with dignity no matter what. And everything in the middle. It's a great tool for, again, examining self and understanding where we are on that continuum.
Cool.
Monica, it's been a great morning. Thank you so much. I thought the book was bold and timely. I thought it was directed at the exact audience that could actually put it into use. It addresses what I believe to be the most critical issue facing America today. And I do have hope that with people like you and organizations like Baber Angels and discussions like this, we're going to come into a better place in this country, a better place that's more constructive, more kind. And that is my hope, right, for us, and I think everybody that's here today and listening online feels the same way. Would you all join me in thanking Monica?
Thank you, Eileen. This was really fun. I learned, that's the goal. I learned a lot from this, so thank you.
I did too. Thank you all for coming.
Right.